about $36.3 trillion. And if we look at the same data point exiting 2020, the global wealth fell actually by around $7 and $7.5 trillion. So depending upon which side of the fence you were in, whether you were a consumer or you were part of a wealth management organization, it's a very interesting data point to look at. Let's take the context of one of the major economies which has seen the biggest relative erosion of wealth, which is United Kingdoms. So the value of in United Kingdom, the value of a UK asset manager AUM grew by about 3.6% to $1.5 trillion in 2020 and is expected to continue to grow to $1.65 trillion this year. This is in spite of having probably one of the worst wealth erosions in 2020. On the other hand, if you look at about half the consumers who had savings and investment products, they have been negatively impacted in 2020. And the same data point in 2020, 45% of the financial advisors have increased their client base and while the consumers had a decline in their wealth assets. So when we take a look at equities, UK equities substantially underperformed their global peers. The FTSE All-Share Index ended 2020 12% down on the level a year earlier, compared to a 16% gain for US S&P 500 and a 3.6% rise in Germany's DAX index. So that's some data points for 2020 and how this has impacted in the COVID year. So as we enter 2021, the wealth and investment industry is seeing some very typical trends that will have a bearing on how we look at, and let's take a look at some of these segments. So the first segment where we are seeing a big shift is a move away from traditional segments and more attention being given to previously underserved segment. It's estimated 60% of UK wealth will be in the hand of women by 2025. In US, mass affluent segments now hold 9 trillion assets across more than 20 million households. And the intergenerational shift of wealth will also see more millennials and Gen X to be focused segments for the wealth management industry, which is leading to more hyper-personalization. The second impact which we will see in 2021 is going to be in the fee and pricing segment. So RIA fees have dropped from an average of 72 basis points in 2019 to 61 basis points in 2020. Similarly, brokerage fees are getting disrupted with Robinhood and Charles Schwab's bringing in no fees and subscription-based fees model. On similar lines, Robinhood added 3.5 million new accounts. Charles Schwab added 1.5 million new accounts in 2020, and 63% of new investors are below the age of 32 years. So fees and how we are looking at outcome-based fee structures is going to be probably one of the big trends which we see in 2021 as we kind of move along. Another big trend which we will see in 2021 is going to be around digital adoption. So the global healthcare crisis caused disruption and service delivery disconnects across value chains and created an urgency and acceleration towards digital adoption. As face-to-face meetings have become restricted, only firms with ready digital channels could service or deliver services to clients. The virtual workforce and severe margin pressures have intensified and continue to get intensified in 2021. And we will see a lot more things around digital adoption this year. Some of the keywords which we will continue to hear and where we will continue to see investments, which will be digital onboarding, intelligent automation, advanced data analytics, and cloud migration. These are all hot topics and areas of investments for wealth and investment management firms. Another interesting data point is that across the capital market ecosystem, we will see currently only 30% of sales happen through the digital channel. So probably this is going to be one big area for us. The fourth big area is going to be around Robo advisory. Robo advisory was a fairly hot topic of discussion uh, pre-COVID, but post-COVID and now in 2021, it is estimated that close to about $1.9 trillion of AUM is going to be managed through the Robo advisory channel, with more than 45 million people are estimated to use Robo advisory by 2025. And that's again one big data point on how we see some of the trends moving in 2021. The current Robo advisory fees are at 30 basis points and are estimated to drop to 5 basis points by 2025. And this is going to be a fairly big trend and will gain momentum this year. The final big trend for 2021 for us, as we look at amongst all the trends, is going to be around the holistic investment. Sustainable investing has been an area of interest for quite a bit of time, but through the COVID timeframes, I think the sustainable investing has fast gained ground, and we will see uh, more and more uh, assets being moved, applying ESG data for investing in these years and so to come. Now, ESG and sustainable investing is also one of the topics which we have in today's panel discussion, which will be led by Padma. Padma Parthasarathy is our global head of consulting, and she will be joined by two of our clients from IDS, Dr. Wolfgang Dietl and Holger Haun, who is the CIO of Annual Reporting Services at IDS. The first session, as we kick this off, is going to be led by BALRAM Pal, who is the head of financial services for us in United Kingdom, and he will be joined by Kolas TRUONG from ISG and Harry Weber Brown from TISA UK. So big thank you to Kolas and Harry again for joining us for this fireside chat. And they will discuss about open finance and its impact on wealth and investments. So ecosystem creation and collaboration is the new way of working in financial services industry for a fair bit of time now. And in this fireside chat, they will discuss about how wealth management industry is collaborating with fintechs and big techs to look at accelerating capability building, expand reach, and achieve cost efficiencies. The second session will be led by our Director of Consulting, Amit Bajaj, and will focus on tech enabling wealth and maintaining customer centricity. Amit will be joined again by Kolas from ISG and John May from UK Bravura and Amanda Walls from who's our CX expert from Bonn will also be joining Amit and the team. And the final session is going to be around tech enabling wealth compliant, where we will talk about regulation, compliance, and securities. This will be led by Rajesh Dudu, who heads our blockchain and cybersecurity practice. And he will be joined by two specialists in this space, Mark Spears, who's from PwC UK, and Steve Murphy, who's the Chief Risk Officer of Target Group. So that's the lineup which we have for today. And like I said, it's a fairly impressive list of speakers that we have on board. It's a fairly interesting list of topics which we have identified and which we have put together. There's going to be some provocative discussions. There's going to be some conflicting thoughts on each of the topics which we have picked out. In case any of you have any queries, questions, or any suggestions, please do keep interacting on the chat windows. Karan, Beena, Anand, and the others who have put this together will be more than happy to kind of answer your questions and probably help take this forward. So with this, I hand over to Balram. And Balram, over to you for the first session on the open finance.
Thank you, Gautam. Good evening, good afternoon, everybody. So we'll spend a few minutes. I'll set the context, and then I will invite both Harry and Kolas to pitch in as well. The way we want to run this is probably I'll set off the context with a few questions to both of them, and then ideally, I think after that it'll be good if we throw it open to the audience for any questions that you may have, either for Harry and Kolas. Right. So in terms of context, we all know, we've all heard of open banking. We know it's up and running. In fact, in the opening slide, I think which Karan had put up, we are saying in the UK over 1 million customers were already using open banking, right? But has it revolutionized the financial services industry? Probably not, because right now the focus has been pretty much on payments and linking, current accounts, right? But the whole idea behind open banking was for the whole ecosystem to come into play. So if you look at the whole technology and the idea behind it, it obviously offers immense potential to those who want to seize those opportunities, right? But interestingly, what we've realized as we talk to people is few customers really know of open banking by the name, right? What they really know is the kind of applications and the kind of access that they have, right? The appetite for, say, useful money management. But does it really, go beyond that? Because as things stand today, open banking primarily covers payments, current accounts, and maybe, some e-money firms, right? All around integrated account information and maybe payment related tasks. Having said that, it doesn't stop us from, linking things which people really want to look forward to, right? So it's things like, can I get a complete holistic view of my finances? Could it, include things like mortgages, loans, my car loans, my pension accounts, my savings account? Could it be a one-stop shop in terms of bringing all of that together, right? And it is with that the FCA has really issued a call saying that, can firms come up and, put together and provide inputs in terms of open finance, right? Which is nothing but how do we extend the open banking like data sharing and third-party access to a wider set of financial products, right? Both on the savings and on the loan side. Now, clearly, having said that, obviously, for that to happen, the ecosystem itself will have to evolve, right? Whether it's the wealth management side, whether it's the provider side, or whether it's the fintech world. And that absolutely, gives rise to an exciting set of opportunities. So with that background, I really want to, throw this open, would like to introduce the two gentlemen well known in the industry. Firstly, Harry. Harry is the Innovation Director for TISA in the UK. He's got over 20 years of experience working in digital strategic planning and program management, has driven a number of wide transformational services across fairly complex stakeholder environments. His experiences cut across both the public sector and the private sector world. So in the public sector, he spent time with the Cabinet Office, the Department of Health, Home Office, and DWP, to name a few. While on the banking side, he's worked with the likes of Old Mutual, Lloyds Banking Group, Reuters. And interestingly, Harry's also spent some time in the not-for-profit sector. So clearly, he brings a wide mix in terms of stakeholders, understanding of various industry segments, and I'm sure he's got a lot to share with us today. He, interestingly, at TISA has been spending a lot of time also with the fintech world. So effectively mentoring and spending time with the digital startups. So again, I think I will leave it to Harry for him to speak a little bit more about his experiences. The other gentleman I have with me today is Kolas. Kolas is a partner with ISG. He focuses on the banking and financial services sector. It's very interesting because Kolas has been working on the provider side, and when I mean provider, on the wealth management side, he's been advising some of the providers in terms of the art of possible, what the world looks like, and what they need to do to keep pace with the changes which is happening around them. So in terms of his own background, he's been an advisor in this industry for over 20 years with ISG, focused on transformation and helping firms achieve operational excellence, primarily on the banking side. He's also advised them on a broad range of market trends, emerging technologies, and associated strategies. Kolas personally has led many large-scale engagements involving technology strategy, operating model design, and back office transformation, front office transformation as well. So I would like to extend a warm welcome to Kolas as well, and look forward to the next 25-30 minutes with both of you. So if I could set the context, Harry, the first one to you, right? What will the open finance economy of the future look like in your view? And what sort of opportunities do you think open finance would offer to the wealth and the investment management market?
Thanks, BALRAM, and thank you very much for inviting me to talk on this Fireside Chat. So as far as the sort of economy is concerned, we have open banking at the moment in the UK. We have about 3 million accounts set up. Many of those are business-to-business accounts rather than consumer accounts, but it is quite a limited proposition. It is purely in retail banking. There is a big push with the regulator, the FCA, to open up finance across other segments of the financial services industry in the UK. TISA, which is a not-for-profit, it's the Investing and Savings Alliance, has about 220 member firms, all in financial services. And so what we've done is we've convened a working group, a project group, to look at how can we open up data from savings, pensions, and the investment industries. And I think from that, to answer your question about what does the economy look like in the future, from that, it will empower the consumer to be able to see a total view of all of their assets. So you could bring in the bank account, the mortgage through open banking, you could bring in savings, pensions, investments. And I think what's interesting about open finance in the UK now is more commonly referred to as open data, because actually what we're also doing is pulling in information from energy. So there's a big push around open energy in the UK, but also things like insurance and health. So from a consumer perspective, the sort of holy grail, as it were, is a full view, or the ability to orchestrate a full view of all of your information in a single place to make better financial decisions. And so, to your point, I think you made a very good point, BALRAM, in your opening remarks. People don't really know what open banking is. It's not a brand, a consumer-facing brand as such. But what it is, it's an enabling technology which kind of sits behind the scenes, which provides the data standards, the registration for regulated firms that can operate in that space. And the propositions will actually be branded by the third-party providers, those firms that can provision the APIs and pull that data subject to the consumer's consent. I think the real trick with this, though, is about collaboration. What we don't want the market to do is to have lots of vertical parts of the industry which cannot talk to each other. So the critical thing for us is to build it on open standards, a common set of APIs, so reusing the APIs that open banking have developed, for example, or certainly that sort of data set. So from a consumer's perspective, they can pull the information in very easily. You need to make it very easy for the consumer to want to use this, be it within a business context, a small business wanting to file their tax returns, or a consumer to use a smart app which says, at the end of the month, if I have any money left in my bank account, please put that immediately into an investment product of some kind. So the critical thing is to ensure that better consumer behaviors come out of this, which basically provides better financial outcomes for the consumer. So it's an enabling technology which kind of sits behind the scenes, which then on top of that, you can orchestrate innovation, efficiency, new products, and all of that will then help push and fuel economic growth in the UK. I think I'll leave that for a starting point, because otherwise I can carry on for a long time with this, BALRAM, but I want to make sure that Kolas has a chance to talk as well. Thank you.
I think there are some very interesting points you make there, Harry. And especially the one around data, the standards around data, the framework, right? And so with that, Kolas, as a part of open finance, what do you think is the impact on security of client data, the ease of interoperability of data, etc., right? So data is critical, but with GDPR, with all the kind of regulations that drive some of this, right? What's your own take on that, having sat on both sides of the world?
Bonjour, merci, BALRAM. I'm going to try to speak in our common language, guys. Hope everybody is well around the call. Let me start by that. Something like 6 or 7 years back, us in ISG, in my part of the world, which is continental Europe mainly, So here, the private banking business as being the outside Switzerland and the inside Switzerland, which is a bit of different profile. We barely had any private bankers client 6 years back. What happened? I'm running a part of our business, which is advising those banks for better operational model. Of course, in all Europe, we're talking about money. And surprisingly to me, at least at that time, very traditional firm from Switzerland came first, asking for what would look like in terms of benchmark their operational model against others. And they started by wanting to be compared to others, private bankers outside, let's say, all Europe. What came first, surprisingly to me, is that they were the higher in cost. I give you a bit of a benchmark here. So we advised 6 very well-known private bankers in Switzerland at that time. It was 2014. And probably the private banking verticals of 4 to 5 major continental European banks, including French, including Swiss, including German. At that time, we found that the cost of their IT, so that's a picture, was about. No, let me say something else. A cost of serving a user in IT was about 50k euro-ish a year. Maybe it doesn't sound familiar to you, but you have to trust me, it's the highest cost ever I've seen in Europe per vertical served in a bank. It would go normally between, let's say, 14k for a retail business up to a standard capital market around, if they are not very cost effective, around 40k. Okay, that's what it showed. Second, at that time, please hear me as this is a picture of a few years back before the word cloud and digitalization existed. The engagement into transformation was less than 10% of their IT cost, which was low, believe me. Today, we're talking really of 2021 onwards. Those firms, the same firm in this part of the world, spend close to 20% of the IT costs to transform themselves. Another topic, at that time, 6 years back, 6 to 7% of their cost was on the data for the client. Today is close or getting close to 20%. Of course, it follows the trend of the market, and especially of what those banks are doing in terms of data lake and exploiting, working the data on the benefit of the business. So, at first, my view is those companies came to us as benchmarker, as experts, to identify and also to cut costs, because they understood that they had to improve their P&L and their balance sheet, and that operation and IT were costing a lot. But now they've turned this process to put more added value on the key drivers for the business. So we will talk a bit later, I guess, on what we see in terms of transformation in terms of strategy for those firms today. But for me, that's the first picture I'd like to share with you guys. Hear me as a picture from the whole Europe. I have the feeling those firms working on other parts of the planet, I mean, in Europe, for example, in Luxembourg, or in Asia, Hong Kong, Singapore, they have an enlarged strategy. But the reason why their legacy was, I don't say they all have completely changed, but some of them drastically changed. It's not here the place to name, but believe me, is because the traditional legacy of the company was those company and those businesses was to build an information system per type of let's say type of customer and in terms of nationality they were serving. And having said that, that means they were having multiple information system which cost crazy money. Okay, so using the added value which has already been developed by the open banking for the businesses, okay, means, as I see that, for those companies to have operational model which is kind of aligned, and that's what they are the good ones for my benchmarker eyes have done.
No, thanks, Kulas. So I think that's very useful, and I think we will come back to the technology transformation piece, and I can see some questions which are coming through from the audience as well. So back to you, Harry, right? And I think I'll also weave in John's question, which he's put on the chat, which is around, is UK leading Europe when it comes to open banking? But more importantly, I think what I do want to put to you, Harry, is do you think in which ways do you think the laws and regulations help open finance, right? Because obviously there's a set of loosely defined laws, right? It's open to interpretation to an extent. If you look at open banking, I think all the major high street banks sort of went in a TISA initially, right? They said, I need to get a tick in the box, so let me just do what is just enough to get by, right? But having said that, I think, how do you see some of these laws and regulations, rules and regulations really impacting or helping open finance, right? Making people a lot more comfortable. And more importantly, it'll be also good to contrast that with your own views in terms of what is stopping adoption.
Okay, no, fantastic. Thanks, BALRAM. So obviously open banking, it was forced upon the banks under the CMA, which is the market authority in the UK, which basically gave an order under PSD2, the Payment Service Directive 2, that banks had to do this. Okay, so legally they had to enact upon it, and so that develops the Open Banking Implementation Entity, which was there to make sure to oversee, to ensure that the big high street retail banks were properly enacting upon the CMA order. So regulation can really obviously push this through. The other parts of the sector is not mandatory at the moment. And you made a very interesting point earlier that the FCA put out a call for input, and it's almost a year ago now, a call for input on kind of what's the future of open finance, how should the FCA position itself, what does the future look like, how well was open banking kind of received, within the marketplace. They had over 100 responses, and they're still writing their evidence response, their response document, which should be out by the end of this month, I've been told by the FCA. What's also happening in the UK on a more local level is the Department of Business, Enterprise and Innovation is working on something called the Smart Data Initiative. Okay, and the view there is they'll put primary legislation through Parliament in the UK, which will enable some enabling regulation or legislation, which will enable secondary legislation to make it mandatory for certain sectors to have to open up their data. So that could be around communications, marketing, energy, insurance, investments, savings, pensions, etc. And we also have in the UK, it is a bit complicated, we also have a pensions bill, which will force the pension operators to open up their data and make it available to a pension finder service, which is being developed by the Money and Pension Service. So it's a very sort of, a mixed field. But I think generally the view within the market is, excuse me, regulation is sometimes necessary to ensure that you get 100% coverage, because what we found within our project, our Open Savings, Investments and Pensions project, is there's quite a few sort of early adopter, first to market type organisations who are quite digitally enabled, who want to do this, both from the data provider side, some of the big insurance companies and pensions companies, but there are some who are also sort of digital laggards. They don't want to open up their data, they're resisting this. And so you'll probably find that if the market doesn't provision this data soon enough, because there is a push within government to do this under open data, if they don't, then it'll become mandatory. And certainly TISA's perspective view is, being a membership organisation, is, we don't necessarily want regulation. We'd like the market to self-organise and develop this. But when we presented this to the regulator about 18 months ago, they said, well, we'll be the judge and see how fast the market sort of pulls together and delivers this. But there's a very big push within government and the regulator for open data, open finance to happen. The second part of your question was around the obstacles. Now, we just recently ran an open event on our project, Open Savings, Investments and Pensions, and we asked questions like polling questions. What are your plans? What are the obstacles? What are the motivators? Where do you see yourself? And the big obstacles at the moment are things such as they're not ready. Some of the big financial institutions aren't ready. Some are very digital, some aren't. So there's a kind of readiness from within the industry. There's also a consumer readiness. Now, we already have a number of services in the UK which will consolidate information, and it will present it back to the consumer, but they use screen scraping, so it's not ideal. Yeah. So I think there's a consumer readiness issue, and I think there's an industry readiness issue. And then there's also the kind of investment side. How much does it cost to do this? So within our program, our strategy is very much, let's get this moving now. Yeah. So if regulation happens, we're already one step ahead, and we can help the regulator regulate it in a way that it's more light touch than open banking, because open banking is very formulaic. They said you have to do it like this, and it incurred, billions of pounds worth of expense on the banks to deliver this. So if we can demonstrate that we can pull the market together and we can deliver this, we may not need regulation. But if we do, we hope it's slightly lighter touch than that was orchestrated for open banking. So there's a lot of moving parts to this. But I think none of these are insurmountable. It will happen. It will happen. Whether it's just purely industry self-organizing, or whether it's driven through regulation. There's a real push in the UK market at the moment to make this happen. In Europe, I think Colas was probably better, but you could talk more about the French market. But as I understand it, there's a big push within the European Commission around data rights, opening up data, etc. I think open banking in the UK is a step ahead of some of the other countries in continental Europe. It has had teething problems. It had about 3 million accounts usage now, but it's growing. And I think to your point earlier, BALRAM, it is about consumer awareness, the value-added propositions that can be built around this. Demonstrating to the consumer quickly that this is a valuable service that you can do, and it is safe, it is secure. So the security issue, again, back to Colas's point earlier, is one of the critical things that we need to be able to communicate to the consumer.
I think that's thank you, Harry. That's very useful. So Colas, I think there's a very interesting point you made there, Harry, right? Billions of pounds being spent getting ready for open banking, right? Because it was prescriptive. Now, having said that, when it comes to open finance, right? And the question for you, Colas, right? Obviously, in the scenario that you described a few years back, the kind of money that the wealth manager and the firms that you were advising were spending was huge, right? But something like open finance will probably ask them to spend a lot more. So at one end, you're looking at, their margins shrinking, obviously, whether it's, cost to income, whether it is, the yield points that they earn, all of those are shrinking, right? At the other end, you're really asking them to, throw open their systems, which means re-architecting a lot of that, moving to a API-based economy, etc. Right? Where do you see the line being drawn between the two?
I'm not sure I'm the good guy to answer to that. Let me turn around your question. First, coming back to security of data. Us in continental Europe, and shall I say us French? Maybe it's a real small part of the world. I'm sorry, guys. This year, we're spending probably in Europe the highest level of security spent on IT, and especially on that kind of business. Private banking as an example. That's 8% of all IT cost, and believe me, we're talking about 8% of many billions here. Okay. I'm not sure your company, guys, if you are working for a private banker, are going to spend drastically more money to go to open world. What I'm sure of is that the reallocation of this money is really underway and in large dimensions. Talking about the famous providers of public services and platforms, we are witnessing today, and what I mean today is really today, not last year. And I only mean for private banking because that kind of business reacted a bit behind some others because of regulation and many, let's say, business constraints. We are witnessing this year many global banking operating their private banking businesses moving or targeting to move within the next 3 years, sometimes 4 years, on some global public platform. And you know that behind that there is a lot of potential regulation constraints. My friend Harry from the UK, for me, he is in Europe, but I buy that he's not in a very difficult way we have to shall I say, suffer, to be challenged with, which is the European Central Bank, okay? And this gives a lot of constraints to us bankers in European community and to this business especially. But what I tell you is that today I know very large bank seated in Luxembourg for their business or in Geneva, Lausanne, or Zurich, who are targeting to put a big part of their operation, I didn't say all their data, out of those countries, not because they don't want to stay in this country for the business, they have to, but because they consider that they will gain the negotiation of streamlining their operation and potentially the management of those critical data on those public platforms or public services regulated in a special manner for them with some of the suppliers. By the way, those suppliers doesn't seem from my window to be equal in terms of assessment by the private banks in Europe. I mean, some of those public platform supplier tends to be considered as potential competitor because they are banks already. If you're talking about AWS or some others, Azure, they have financial services, not yet on this private business, but coming. Some others which tend to be forgotten recently, even if they are very big, I name it, IBM as an example, are considered differently for now. I mean, they are not the biggest platform provider today in the world, even if they are redesigning their strategy currently, but they seem to be quite ahead from what I hear on negotiation with private bankers who want to streamline, want to reorganize for the opening bank world. And that's what I see. So I can't really tell you if you guys are going to spend a lot more cost. I'm not 100% sure because I consider from my very prejudiced view, comparing you with others, that you already spent a lot of money on this. But for sure, it's redesigned. The example I gave you on the data and what you spent on it, storing it, archiving it, accessing to it, okay? 8% of the IT budget yesterday, I called yesterday 6 years back, close to 20% today, okay? That's massive, okay? Of course, technology has a great impact on it, but the regulation behind and the capacity to go potentially or to manage this data from open platform obviously make a lot of opportunities. So that's what I can add.
I think thank you so much, Kolas. So I know, gentlemen, we are out of time, but really appreciate your inputs, Harry and Kolas. I think I'm sure the audience would have wanted to spend more time and ask you more questions, but yeah, I think hopefully we'll speak soon. I'd like to hand this over to Amit, my colleague, for the next session. So thank you, Harry, once again. Thank you, Kolas.
Thanks. Thank you, BALRAM, and thanks, Kolas and Harry, for a wonderful session, great insights. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to the panel and to the participants who have joined us from all over the world. Thank you for your time. The next session, this session really is, we are seeing this all around us. Consumers have never been so digitally demanding as they are now. We see that in our clients, they demand more self-service. We see that around us. We are seeing the rise of the pandemic investor. Gautam spoke a bit about that in his opening keynote. We're also seeing the rise of the Reddit stock surge, GameStops and other stocks being surged by social media, and it's there around us. We have even had a new ETF, Buzz, launched, which is driven by social media. So it's around us. We're seeing that all across. Now, today, while we have digitally demanding consumers, we also have wealth firms trying to change their operating model. They're rushing to change the operating model to accommodate this change. And today we have a distinguished panel to talk about this very seminal topic. And the topic is, how can tech enable this journey which wealth firms have started on towards this new operating model, towards customer centricity, and we are going to talk about that. So, very welcome, Amanda, John, Kolas, are you there as well? I hope. Okay, lovely, good to see you again, Kolas. So first of all, we have a quick introduction on our panelists. We have Amanda Walls, who's Vice President at the Bond Group, a global digital agency based out of New York City. And she's responsible for sales, executive management across banking, financial services clients, innovator leader, 20 years of experience across the industry, has a reputation for developing relationships to build a positive cross-organizational interactions, helping stakeholders identify business challenges and see opportunities as benefits of change. Amanda speaks often on the key principles of any organization's transformation success, which is the key customer experience, and how CX is made of 3 essential components, which must be seamlessly delivered, irrespective of the industry vertical. Welcome, Amanda. We also have John with us. John is a business development manager at Bravura Solutions, a global provider of technology to financial services organizations. He's based in London and has worked in the industry for over 25 years, having started his career in the business. And he soon became, I know John, he is very, very passionate, fixated about the transformative potential of technology. And he's involved in technology delivery, long time now. He's held senior positions in delivery, business development across technology companies in Europe. And he remains convinced that technology has the power to unlock the excellent customer outcomes across the industry. So welcome, John. And finally, our third speaker is Kolas. Kolas has been, he's been introduced by BALRAM, but so Kolas is a partner banking based in Southern Europe for ISG. He's been with ISG for 20 years. He's very ardent proponent of digital transformation. He's helped businesses achieve operational excellence, focusing on transformation for banking clients, advise them a broad range of market trends, operating models, strategies, and he's also led large-scale engagements involving strategy to operating model design. Kolas previously has also been in Tokyo as a forex trader. Kolas, that's wonderful. I was in Tokyo as well for a few years. Wonderful place. And in London as well before running his own venture capital firm in Luxembourg. So welcome, Kolas, once again. Thank you for joining us. Without much ado, our first question would be for Amanda. Amanda, we talking about customer sensitivity. We talk about technology driving the operating model change. Many enterprises have already started their CX journey. Some are in the midst and the thick of it, but they are unsure about the outcomes. They're unsure of how to measure that the outcomes and the benefits. So, from your vast experience, Amanda, could you help us help the participants gain some understanding of some of the key principles and strategies that make up a successful client experience transformation, and how do you measure them?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me in that wonderful introduction. I'm happy to kick off the discussion today. So when we talk about customer experience at the Born Group with our clients, we really want to assess where they are in their journey. And there's three specific and distinct areas that are important to consider. So customer experience is really the sum of three things: the brand experience, the behavioral experience, and the book of record experience. So all three of these areas must really be working together to provide an excellent experience for your clients. So just to dig a little bit deeper here, the brand experience, sometimes called omni-channel experience, is probably what most of you think about when you interact with a company that you're doing business with. So what does it feel like to me when I visit your company's website or interact on the mobile application? How do I feel about the company's tweets, their Instagram or other social media posts? What impressions do I have about an organization after I chat with their customer service, say if I have a problem or if I want to open a new account or another line of business? These are all brand experiences that I have as a consumer. The second component of customer experience is the behavioral experience. This could be the customer's journey that a consumer might take while physically inside your building back in the before times. This could also include maybe reading emails that your marketing team sends about a new product, or an analysis of that customer's behavior to determine the next best action to send them in order to get that customer to do something that you want them to do, like more business with you. So data analytics and profile management of your consumers also fits into this behavioral experience. The third component of customer experience is what we call the book of record experience. Book of record is essentially all the places where your data lives, like your CRM that you use to manage your clients and your new leads, or your back-end systems, or your core banking system, or the ERP. This is essentially where your business intelligence is derived. So when a financial services company tells me they want to transform or optimize their customer experience, I like to break it down into those three subcategories: brand, behavior, and book of record. Now, it's possible that your company does one or two of these things really well, but might struggle with another. So until that struggle is addressed, your consumers really aren't having the best possible experience with your company. It's kind of like a three-legged stool with a leg missing, right? So you don't need to start from scratch to optimize your experience, but you do need to determine and address and work through the things that need improvement. In the financial services world, I typically find that most organizations need help with their book of record experience. And this is usually due to legacy systems or siloed systems or systems that aren't integrated together. A major challenge that financial services institutions are also facing today is they aren't taking advantage of all of the data that they have and using that data to make informed decisions. And they are certainly not engaging and leveraging all of the AI capabilities that they have built into their software. So when all of these factors come together, you're really operating on all three cylinders. And this customer will really finally start to feel like they're a part and a center of everything that you do. This customer-centric thinking is really all-encompassing.
You're on mute, Amit.
Can't hear you, Amit. You're on mute, Amit.
Yes, thank you. So very insightful. Thanks, Amanda. I think this, this topic is really something which I'm passionate about as well. And I heard something that personas sometimes are static, behaviors are living, and that really captures. Goes a long way in capturing trust and experience for a consumer. Tom, would you want to add anything to it before I move on to invite you for a question?
Well, I'm going to anticipate the question, but I'm probably going to pick up on some of Amanda's themes anyway, especially around AI and the use of data.
Sure, lovely, brilliant. So John, customer centricity has taken prime position in the operating model for wealth firms. Now, how have you seen technology supporting this prime position over the past many years?
Well, thank you. I mean, that is a cracker of a question, but it is quite broad. So I think I'd probably keep it practical and just talk about things that I've really seen and that I really sort of expect to see, because otherwise I'll end up talking about things like DLT and blockchain. And frankly, I'm not an expert, firstly, and secondly, I don't really have any real use cases today where the chain has helped with customer centricity. I mean, there are other use cases, but so we'll probably have to come back to some of those things next year or the year after, right? But firstly, you've raised a really interesting premise in your question, which is that wealth managers have indeed put centricity at the top of their agenda, right, and that they focused on it. And I think overall that's true. Over time, I've been lucky enough to work with like asset managers and wealth managers and some private banks as well in continental Europe. And by and large, customer centricity has been front of mind for them. There have been some blips, I would say, over the years where unintended consequences of regulation or product promotion have taken over financial planning as a priority. But by and large, let's say yes, right? Wealth managers have really tried to put customers at the heart of their business, right? And if I look at how they've done that over time, I'm going to come back to some of Amanda's principles about digital engagement and customer experience. But my point here, I think, today is that we're on the edge of another paradigm, and that's really making good use of artificial intelligence, frankly. And it's coming just at the right time, I also sense, because of the ever-increasing transparency and consumer sovereignty that we're seeing now in the world. It's going to be really critical that wealth managers exploit artificial intelligence and I think machine learning more specifically, but we'll come on to that, right? If we talk about, let's talk about customer experience and what I've seen over the years and how that's helped put customer centricity at the front of the agenda. It was really firstly with some pretty simple digital portals, some portals and some websites, which were initially just to give the customer some reports, some views on information. And then that pretty rapidly, and they were really successful because they were better than what came before. But then they dramatically improved when we were able to start making use of more logic in digital experiences. And this brought the customer closer to the firm, right? So you had decision trees and wizards and forms that would react based on your previous inputs. Now this was all, and these are still really successful today, right? Let's be clear, we all use apps that work like this, but they use what we sort of call a very narrow version of artificial intelligence. They are artificially intelligent, but they're narrow because they're still working in a programmatic way, right? The tool can only work based on the logic that you tell it based on the inputs that it's given. And that starts to become a bit limiting now, especially when the data which you can call on is now so huge, or we hope it's huge, because what we hope and what we don't always see is that while wealth managers have deployed these tools which engage with clients, they haven't always been capturing each of those interaction points. The key is to capture all of those interaction points. You don't know when you'll need them later. You don't know when you'll need data later. So those that will succeed in the future, I suspect, will have captured that data. They'll have been pouring it into repositories in unstructured ways that can now and in the future be scanned, right, for patterns, and they'll be used to ask it really quite complex questions. And what that brings you, and what they need to ask them that complex question is, of course, artificial intelligence and machine learning. And it plays right back to something Gautam said right at the beginning of this summit about hyper-personalization. That's where this takes you, because now, and we are seeing it today, by the way, it's not the future. Wealth managers are using artificial intelligence in their operations, right? But they are, it tends to be at the edge, at the border of the operation, because the market sensibly tests new technology first before it lets it into its critical organs, you know, its heart and its lungs. It tests it on the edge first. So we're seeing that now. We've got a product at Bravura. I'm not here to promote that. There are plenty of others that also have artificial intelligence products, but I think it's a good example of one of where it's been adopted. It's at the edge. It sits and it takes unstructured communications in from clients or advisors or employers, and it sits there and it works out the intent and the sentiment behind each of those communications, right? And people often think, oh, that's an operational efficiency play. You're just trying to do things with robots that humans do more expensively. There's a part of that, but it's the second part that's more interesting, actually. The machines don't make the mistakes that humans make that often lead to customer dissatisfaction, right? That's point one. So if I send an email in today and I ask for a valuation and my tax statement from last year, there's a really strange behavioral thing where humans tend to read an email and just action one of the things, one of the two. It's unusual, no one can explain it, but it's evidenced. A machine won't do that, right? The machine will take that email. If it can understand, if it's confident that it can understand the intent behind those two questions, it will process both of them and process them accurately, right? Point one. The second point, which is I reckon even more important, but still doesn't get you to the mega importance, is the sentiment analysis of this. So if we assume that my email is the third time that I've had to ask this organization, right, my language and my tone that I write that email in will reflect my dissatisfaction. Now, a human who reads that can choose whether or not they act on that dissatisfaction. And they might hide it, right, because it might have been them that didn't answer last time. The machine never does that. The machine will be able to understand the style, the language, the tone, and it makes no judgment on whether it should forward it or not. It knows that that client is dissatisfied, therefore it flags it, and it passes it on to a human that can then get straight on the phone and try and remedy the situation, right? Apologize, explain, empathize with that customer, and make sure you retain them. This is the key, right? Because in the future world where you've got such transparency and competition, you've got to retain every client as well as win the new ones. And so what we move here, and again, I think this is only one of the very small benefits of machine learning and artificial intelligence, is we move away from NPS scores and that kind of way of looking at your satisfaction with your clients and how close you are to them, and you make it real time. It's as those interactions are happening, you get real input on the client. So this is really moving towards client centricity in my mind. There are barriers, right, to adoption of artificial intelligence and machine learning in a more fundamental, transformational way. But maybe we talk about them a little bit later, Amit. But so what am I saying? I'm saying that I think the real thing that will enable greater customer centricity in the future will be the huge data that Amanda's already spoken about brilliantly, but then the artificial intelligence and the machine learning tools especially on top.
Yeah, no, thank you. That makes such a lot of sense, John. Moving on, Kolas, can I invite you next? You have been so closely involved, working, ardent proponent of digital, its strategic and operational benefits, and you have been working with wealth managers, private banks alike, globally, a lot in the continent, as you said earlier. You must be witnessing some of these transformations, the initiatives, the changes happening right in front of you. What can you help the participant understand some of the changes you're seeing, and and how the clients, how are wealth firms benefiting from such transformations?
Amit, please hear me as a very prejudiced, fact-based consultant. What I mean is what I say here is what I see. And I guess John is probably sitting in the UK, and those guys are probably a bit ahead of us on AI adoption. As I see it, that's my prejudice view. I don't want to underline again that I'm calling from all Europe, but in many ways, the private banking business I see is behind this curve where I am. Not all of them, because they are, and please hear me, from France, Germany, Switzerland, potentially Monaco. Okay. So to give you an idea, the adoption of AI to bring added value and to optimize your customer experience in those groups sitting in this part of the world, I see them on their platform in Asia. That's where what I see. Is it a trend? What I can tell you is that if ever, let's take a standard bank operating private banking activities based in Europe. Today, I have a business in Switzerland, I have a business in Luxembourg, I have a business maybe in France or in Spain, in Germany. Tomorrow, my operation to run this business will be pushed potentially. When I say tomorrow, it's another 2 to 3 years, but the decision has been taken in Singapore and Hong Kong. Okay. Because there is an added value already identified to speed up the optimization of this customer experience. So my first remark is, from my perspective, we private banker in all Europe, continental Europe, are old and behind. Everybody think about it, everybody works on it, but I can tell you there are very big gaps between some companies and some others. So around the call, there may be companies who already have taken the curve, seated, for example, in Switzerland. And if you guys are seated in Switzerland working for a very big bank, for example, I can tell you there are very traditional banks I know who do think about that, but they are late. Second topic, some of those private bankers platform existing with their legacy, some of them you probably know, are selling their own services to other private bankers. You can name some of them. Could happen in Switzerland, could happen in Luxembourg. I don't know many in France, but maybe. There is a question mark on that for the future regarding going to open banking and digital world. And so I can't tell you the answer of this question mark, but I can tell you that there is a lot of thinking around what's the future of that. Because for some banks, example in Switzerland, I mean Swiss bank, okay, operating and developing private banking only, this represents a quite large amount of revenue, okay? And going to this new, let's say, possibility of going open in this closed world is probably a threat, or that's what some of them see, to this revenue they have, okay? So that's, again, one witness I give you from what I hear. Then again, I want to stop here just telling that from here, the guys, we hate the English people because they quitted us, but we recognize that they are ahead of us for many reasons. And our friend, I don't know where you're sitting, Amanda, but probably in the UK, I don't know, or in Germany. Okay. But again, the expansion of this new way of operating the business, thanks to the capacity of this evolving technology and solution, from what I see here, will be mainly driven by the existing platform in Asia. That's what I see right now. maybe it's going to change. Okay.
Appreciate that. I think it's very, very, I would say, practical, relevant sort of points for us. Much appreciated. Before I can go on and on really with questions. But I think I'll come back if I have the time. But I think I have some questions from the audience. Yes, so there's a question for John. John, the question is: in the experience of the gentleman who's asking the question, large banks are extremely good at data ingestion and have built data lakes which look more like data swamps with poor analytics to complement them, to exploit the data. Do you think that these can be leveraged really can be exploited to drive the kind of AI ML solutions you were talking? Is good data a precursor? Is it relevant and important to drive?
So it's a really good question, right? Because I'm positive Peter, right? So I'm going to say yes, because that's my default. Because I think if you've collected the data and it's relevant, then you'll be able to get to it and you'll be able to use it. Okay. It does talk to one of my barriers, though, that I do see and I do foresee, which is, and it's something that the other panelists have mentioned already, which is about the sort of siloed approach to operations and organizations. So getting good quality data to flow between silos is really challenging. That's one aspect of it. There's also sort of cultural and organizational aspects to firms which aren't used to adopting and embracing, the sort of change and the sort of technology that artificial intelligence and machine learning lends itself to. But back to the question, it will depend, right? It will depend on how much of a swamp the data lake has become, frankly, and which part of the data lake has become swamped. Because one thing that we start to see, and I was a little bit flippant earlier when I said capture every bit of data, because you don't know that you might need it in the future. I still believe that's fundamentally true, but when you start to capture bad series of data, it can have material impacts downstream. So it depends, I suppose, is the answer. But I'm generally positive, because there's a lot more data management and data governance tools available today than there were this time last year and the time before that. So I'm going to say yes.
Can I add something, Amit?
Please, Kulas.
Well, I had a yes to the yes, but we have some engagement which started very recently for some very few banks to improve their management of the data in favor of the customer. How was that operated? They came to us asking, can you help us? And we said we did that already. Who did you do that for? No banks. It was for automotive and retailers.
Yeah, indeed.
In Germany, by the way. And that was very interesting, because they started saying, okay, can we discuss with those guys? So we connected them. That's very recent, just like a few weeks ago. And now we seem to be in a position to advise them to go to the next. But the barrier we see is not the technology barrier. So it's really more a people barrier, a culture barrier. So, and that's really the difference I would make. And with all respect to data in bank compared to data in another type of industry, I don't think this is a big difference. I mean, the people topic is tremendous. I mean, you have to change the way the people or the culture of the people around operating the data, and probably the profile of your guys to do that. So answering to what was the question? How customer is driven? No, that's not here. How large banks are going to digest this? I'm pretty sure in few years from now, I could come back to you and make a fact-based return in front of you saying I have 20% of my customers who succeeded and 80% who failed. Okay, and I don't fully think it's linked to a banking topic on the data lake management added value. Okay, as I see it. Just wanted to add this comment.
No, that's great, Leslie. Thank you for that. I think just I've seen the rise of the data ops culture, which not only drives better tooling, but drives the capability and the operating model needed to build that front to back clean data process with validations at the right time. We have another question from Padma. Very interesting question. I think it's so. She says, how much of the customer experience is driven by the customer expectations, really, which have been set, benchmarked by the experience with the likes of Google or Amazon? That's driving the expectations of clients. And so how much of customer experience is driven? Maybe Amanda, if you
Yeah, I was actually just typing an answer because I didn't think we were going to have time to address this, but I think it's very significant. So if you think about the types of experiences that you have as a consumer on your mobile app and with retailers and with business that you do just living as a human, we expect that same type of experience from everybody that we do business with. And I do think that financial services organizations tend to be the laggards. I mean, they are really behind when it comes to delivering this kind of customer experience that consumers expect today because they're getting it elsewhere. So if I'm getting it elsewhere, I know it can be done. You're just choosing not to do it for whatever reason. So I do think that's significant, and challenger banks are seizing that opportunity, and they're coming in and they're taking advantage of the marketplace, knowing that they can provide better service, and that almost always starts with technology.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. Great. Now I think we almost done with time. So, my sincere thanks to all of you for joining across the globe. We have a very diverse panel joining from the US, from continental Europe, and from UK. So much appreciated. Thank you very much for that. I'm going to transfer the baton over to Padma. Padma will lead the ESG, Sustainable Investing session. So Padma, over to you, please.
Thank you, Amit. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure to welcome you to this panel discussion, the penultimate one, which is on the ESG investments, and to introduce our esteemed panel members who are joining us from IDS today. So IDS, or more precisely IDS GmbH, Analysis and Reporting Services, is a wholly owned subsidiary of Alliance SE, and it offers a range of services to support investments, which include data management, risk control, performance analysis, and reporting. And we have with us today Dr. Wolfgang Dietl, who is the Managing Director and CFO at IDS. He's been with IDS since its foundation in 2001 and has been a member of the management board of IDS since 2010. Dr. Dietl has a PhD in business administration, and his work as a marketing consultant in the early part of his career gives him a very strong customer focus. Prior to IDS, he worked at Allianz Life Insurance and also with a private asset management company. He has strong IT expertise and is good at adapting new technology in the asset investment management space. And joining us with Dr. Dietl is his colleague, Mr. Holger Haun, Managing Director, CIO, and Head of Service Development at IDS. Mr. Haun is part of the founding team at IDS and is responsible for the platforms around data management, performance, risk, and reporting. Mr. Haun has more than 20 years of experience in IT and data management in the asset and investment management space. And he brings this combination of deep technical expertise combined with deep product knowledge in the domain. And prior to IDS, he's worked in various functions in IT control and finance in the Allianz Group. We are delighted to have you here, Wolfgang and Wolfgang and Holger. And we're looking forward to the discussion now. Just to introduce this topic, there's been a growing adoption of environmental, social, and governance mandates by corporates across the world. And organizations are looking beyond serving just the shareholders with a profit mandate to this larger stakeholder base. And they've started to track, report, and address issues on carbon footprint, diversity and inclusion, and that goes beyond just gender diversity into things like race, language, economic background, all of those factors that make us who we are. And also into governance issues, which again covers not just their own organizations, but also the entire ecosystem of partners and suppliers that work with them. So you're really going from serving shareholders to this larger stakeholder base and stakeholder capitalism, as it's sometimes called. So in this session, we'd like to discuss the impact of ESG on investments. ESG investment has been growing multifold. That is, investment in funds that talk about investing in organizations that have ESG as their priority. In fact, investments by high net worth individuals are expected to grow from about 4 trillion 2 years ago to 9 trillion 2 years from now. So it's a huge growth that is expected. So I'm going to ask you, Wolfgang, what is causing this interest and demand for ESG funds as an investment class? Is it concern for the planet, for social, or for societal equality? Where is it really coming from? You're on mute, I think, Wolfgang.
It's working now? Okay. Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. And I guess this is a perfect start for the entire topic, because this is a vast field. One really has to make a clear distinction what we are talking about. Basically, in my opinion, ESG, and specifically the E in the ESG, the climate topic, is one of the mega trends of these days. I guess there's no doubt about it. And now we are coming more or less implicitly to the old economic situation. There is a growing interest, and therefore this growing interest meets sooner or later the supply, and demand drives, so to speak, the supply in this context. I'm not sure what is the real reason for it in terms of, okay, this was exactly the starting point. I guess a lot of people unconsciously thought that there's something wrong, with the environmental development. Then they are obviously aware of what's going on in the world, deforestation and all this stuff. And there's a growing interest in terms of, what is really behind it. And people learned that we are not talking about a local phenomenon in the sense that, okay, there's a country, there was a flood catastrophe, but it's far away. And so people understood, and all the data evidence is given, that there is no doubt about it, that this is a global issue, what we are talking about. And you see it also from the millennials in the Friday for Future movement and stuff like that, that this has really now a strong foundation, specifically in this portion of the society, which is the future investor, so to speak. And therefore, this is also for the finance industry, obviously, a very important topic to deal with accordingly.
Okay, so you're actually saying it is the concern for the planet that is driving this, and then, of course, the other aspects of the will come in.
Right.
Olga, I'm going to ask you, how has this impacted the demands on data and technology? Because, as wealth managers look to advise clients, how do they get the right data regarding ESG, and how is IDS, for instance, providing this kind of information? Oh, I think you're on mute as well. Okay.
It's a very, very nice topic, data for ESG. I think this is also a very good use case for companies to drive innovation and to establish a data architecture for analytics and reporting, if not happened so far. But let's start with the data demand for ESG reports and analytics or KPIs. So one thing is what we need is classical portfolio information. Yeah, that's obvious. So and this is, I think, this is a commodity for reporting and analysis in the investment or asset management area. Everyone should have this. What we need in addition is we need a lot of additional data describing more the company itself or the organization. So we need commitments of organizations or governments regarding ESG topics. We need information that describes carbon emission. We need physical risk data. So, for example, global or regional temperature pathways. So we need a lot of information we didn't have used in the past or actual in the investment analytics. And to collecting this data, so we have many new suppliers also, besides the already existing well-known providers like MSCI or Bloomberg or Refinitiv. But we also need suppliers like NGOs, which can provide us information which might be helpful at the end for calculating KPIs. And we also need information or take information from the companies itself, what they are publishing, using NLP models, for example, to extract data, what they have published in the balance or in the publications. This becomes at least more complicated if we look into the non-market traded investment space and the companies they belong to. So because then we have fewer information on that, and it's harder to get this information. And not to forget, at the end, all information must be assigned to the correct company, so they must be linked. So you need a very flexible and powerful data management at the end. And last but not least, you need a lot of meta information which describes the data, so they can be flexibly retrieved by users. So the meta information and are, for example, so status of delivery classifications or quality status. Yeah. So that means from the technological point of view, we have to handle structured as well as unstructured data. We have to use different or new delivery models, new frequencies. We have to use stream data, and we have to use massively AI or machine learning for data extraction or for quality assurance because of the massive data. So at the end, just to wrap it up, there's challenges which are in fact not really new, because everyone who is in this area underway, this data management, we have this new data providers, new data domains, large data volumes, new data structures, new technological innovations, and a need for flexibility and speed. So this is not really new. And cloud is then I think this is what we are doing or using. Cloud is the answer from the technology side, to answer the questions we have from the ESG area.
Thank you. So yes, it's a far more complex world than for providers of data here.
Yes, it is. Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah. Yes. Wolfgang, what is the ESG impact on product creation and the whole investment process? So in the past, I think ESG goals were not always aligned to portfolio returns. So, you would see it as a high return versus this good, responsible behavior by the corporates. Whereas now, I think more and more people are seeing it as high return and responsible behavior. Is that correct?
Right, this is absolutely right. And this is, I guess, one of the main topics which is making the industry in total a little bit nervous, because there is no clear pathway how to get this stuff incorporated. I mean, there has been evidence that ESG and alpha generation is more or less closely linked, at least on a correlation basis. If it's really a causality, I'm not sure yet. But there has been also academic studies from Oxford University with Arabesque and I guess Deutsche with the University of Hamburg on a meta-study level, which really proves that there seems to be a positive causality, not only correlation, right? But this is just, the obvious thing one can measure. but we have to take into account that alpha is just one aspect currently in the industry, but there are others already, like IFRS 9 regime. I have to make sure that I make up my balance sheet according to the rules which are given by the standard setter from that side. Then obviously, at least in Europe, I have the solvency problem. How to make sure that I can put in the shopping window what solvency factor I reached, and now additionally this ESG topic comes up, and this is the huge challenge, I guess, for all those who do asset liability management, to find a proper and transparent way how to incorporate that exercise into the strategic asset allocation, which then in turn is more or less the mother of each technical asset allocation, meaning what mandates for what asset manager and what rule to follow. And here, obviously, also the regulator is asked to give some guidance, so to speak, because the various data sources or logics, how the current data providers are behaving, this is to some extent transparent, right? But the methodologies are so different that the results which are coming out of the various models have a very little correlation, right? If you do a comparison, for example, again, from Moody's against Standard & Poor's for the credit rating, that you see a correlation of 0.9 or something. If you do it on the ESG factors, you see it well beneath 0.5. It could be just arbitrary what the result is. And the question is then, how to proceed and what is the proper methodology which should be applied. Also in order to meet the requirements what the clients at the end have, right? Not only in the retail space, but also in the institutional area.
Understood. So it's a question of the collection of the data, which is the complex process that Holger was talking about, and then incorporating that into these risk modeling systems that that also become quite complex because of that.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah.
Understood. So, but logically, though, one would think that having an organization that has taken care of the ESG concerns would make it sustainable in the long term, because it's taking care of environmental issues, it's taking care of societal and governance issues, obviously putting in reducing the risk of its own long-term kind of viability. So one would logically think that it should be correlated, but like you say, it's probably not built into the models as yet.
I mean, I guess the problem lies in a different corner. Just take most investors. They have obviously one eye at the benchmark, right? And the benchmarks currently are organized in a kind of one-size-fits-all fashion, right? So I think I'm an investor who is eager on having taken that into account. Then I will look for any benchmark which carries the name ESG in it. But this is really the wrong way, because if you look at the various constructions, and I just checked today a few examples, that those companies who say I try to avoid this fossil fuel consumption, they're underrepresented in those funds who are claimed to be exactly represented exactly like that. This transparency is simply not given. And on the other hand, you also have to make sure that you balance all these factors correctly. Obviously, I'm stressing in my speech all the time, this E factor in this ESG, but there are others as well. And if you take, for example, this Volkswagen example, currently they are tremendously investing to renew their fleets, to get it in an electric version transferred. But on the other hand, how do we deal with this fact that they really betray the public in the diesel scandal, right? Is it now good or is it how bad? You know, the question how you value the single factors into your target function, it's also not obvious, and there are a lot of degrees of freedom for either greenwashing or just to have it done for the sake of having it done. But there is a lot of work to be done in order to streamline it the way that really the result is coming out what I'm as an investor intend to have at the end of the day.
Understood. Yes, I think, is that therefore then what is causing the US to move a little slower on, allowing ESG fund investments for things like pension funds? Because I see that European and UK regulations allow that, the US doesn't allow it. Do you think this could be a contributing factor?
You mean from a regulator's point of view?
Yes, because I mean, in Europe and UK, pension funds are allowed to invest. In fact, I think they're encouraged to invest in ESG funds. Whereas in the US, they're seen actually as a risky investment.
Right. I mean, the US, based on my understanding, is really lagging behind for various reasons. I guess this is, I mean, it's too superficial saying this is a Trump stuff. Obviously, this wasn't helpful, I guess. But based on my understanding how SEC is constructed and how the SEC rules are interpreted, this is not obvious, how to develop that topic to the next level. I mean, currently you're right, but I guess SEC is feeling the pressure that they have to change something, whatever. Currently, they argue saying, I mean, what matters have to be disclosed, but this is simply not enough. And I expect in the very near future, and the new administration might be supportive here as well, that the US regime is changing here as well.
Understood. Okay. Holger, I'm going to ask you, what is the role? We talked about the role of, say, data vendors, and you said, how the Bloombergs, et cetera, of this world are providing data today. But it really is taking an organization like yours to put it all together, what's coming from this. So do you think that the role of the data vendors would change in their actually providing this kind of information or sourcing kind of information, in fact, before even they provide it? And what's the kind of monetization model for this kind of data?
Data vendor. So I think the data vendors stays important as they are at the moment. So we have seen a lot of new supplier for data seeing in the market over the last few years, but we have also seen now a concentration of this data vendors at the end. So my opinion, the existing huge data vendors will extend the data coverage also for the ESG required data in general. But at the end, something like someone like we can collect this from different sources, and we can build a data view together with their portfolios, so which the market data provider can't do. So we bring the portfolios together with the ESG ratings, and then we can provide information which then can be used for optimization of the investment portfolio itself. So there's a lot to do after you have collected all the information, and that's it.
Sure. Yes, so basically, I think there is an evolution that will take place of this industry, especially from the data provision space that we will see. Right? How else do you see the market evolving, Wolfgang? Because we now see this intergenerational shifts, right? A lot more wealth is probably going to be coming to the younger generation now. And as this wealth shifts, do you think that there would be more demands from the millennials again of moving towards ESG investment?
I guess there's an absolute yes on this question. The next generation, specifically the millennials, I mean, one has to have a look at the background. I mean, they grew up during a period where wealth is just there. You know, they know the other stuff just from the history books, and this is one aspect. And the other aspect is, which makes me a little bit laugh, that a piece of this population also is, from a consumer's perspective, a little bit of a hybrid consumer. You know, they come from heli skiing and ask the financial advisor the next day how to invest in ESG. And well, this is also okay. But as I said before, the ESG product world hasn't been differentiated enough to serve those who have really intrinsic interest in changing something, whatever that means, right? And I try to do a comparison against the car market, for example. I mean, if the car market started probably 100 years ago, and you had this tin lizzie model, you know, and everybody who was eager on getting a car bought this tin lizzie model. And here we are in the same situation. If you look at the again on the benchmark world, where you can identify it easily, you have this MSCI World ESG and with SRI at the end, you know, and nobody really knows what this is about. And I expect in the midterm tremendous product differentiation, just in order to make sure that each taste from the consumer side, so to speak, is really met. Some might be more interested in, let's say, in this green financing area. Others might be more stressing for themselves, you know, this equality thing from the governance point of view. Others, I do not know what else differentiation you can imagine. And basically assume the data were available, and basically they are. There's more than 100 organizations collecting data, and the art will be to bring them together in a way, and this is, I guess, a little bit what Holger was driving, in a way that you can really fulfill that differentiation need. And specifically the millennials, this is the consumer group who is preferring those producers who have an individualization in their product offer, right? And therefore, this individualization will drive the variety of products. And this is at the same time, again, the chance for those who are currently a little bit on the defensive side. On the asset manager side, you have more or less a distinction between those who are actively managing and those who are in the ETF world, or, you know, managing both. And the ETF world will a little bit go, you know, back, I guess. And the other portion will gain, because this will be more or less an amalgamation of both worlds, and those who play this game best, I guess they will win this game. There is no doubt about it. And obviously the money which is to be invested is really an incredible amount. And therefore, the industry, I guess, is well advised to position themselves according to that logic.
Understood. So you see more structured products coming into this kind of space.
So to speak, yes.
Understood. Understood. We have a few questions from the audience as well. So I think, Holger, this one is for you. Do you see investment management firms building their own data platforms to process ESG data? Or do you see the industry move towards a shared platform or as a service models?
I think both directions. It depends on the size of the organization. So, in my opinion, the large organizations, and we belong to one, is building their own solution and looking for partnerships where they can share data, where they can share services, whatever you can imagine. For the small to mid-size organizations, I think it's really expensive and complex, this topic, to manage from the technological point of view, and they can look more for for managed services or for mid-sized organizations with using what I said before with cloud technology. There is this offers a new variety of delivery models, and mid-sized companies can use it by integrating data or functions via APIs, for example, into their business processes. So not relying only on managed services, but also on taking raw data or functions into their systems. So it's a mixture, and there's an initiative, this open source Carbon, which is a platform or initiative in the market, which is independent from driven by huge entities as AWS, Microsoft, Goldman Sachs, Allianz, and some others. Zortec, hope I hadn't forget someone who was really important there. And they try to establish a platform which can be used as an open source model for data for entities, for organizations. And this will be really helpful, at least for the mid-size, for mid-size organizations.
Absolutely. Thank you. There's another question, and I guess this is for you, Wolfgang. Are there stricter regulations anticipated in ESG investing, and how data is processed with regards to ESG? So Wolfgang, would you like to?
I didn't get the first part of the question. Could
So
you repeat it, please?
do you anticipate stricter regulations for ESG investment?
Right. There's no doubt about it. Yes, this is underway already, at least in Europe. And I guess you're aware of that Europe is the biggest ESG market by far. And already in 2014, the European community issued a paper saying, okay, prepare yourself for the so-called non-financial data disclose. And it's getting more and more concrete. What's not yet clear is how will the regulator handle the trade-off between credit rating and ESG rating, because currently the regulator obviously looks at the credit stuff from a consumer protection point of view, and the dominance or the influence or the strength of the ESG is not yet clear. There is one example already, for example, this Bank of England stress test, which is directly heading in that direction, but this is more or less a local regulation, and there we see already in France this French energy translation law, where the local regulator already went ahead instead of waiting for the European community. But there is no doubt that this topic will come on top and not substituting what the regulator already is asking you to deliver.
Okay. So the profit objective and the credit objective is still primary, and this is the add-on objective that comes.
Right. In my opinion, at least. I mean,
sure.
I'm not sitting in the regulator's organization, but I guess this will be the future.
Understood. There's another question that is there as well, which is quite interesting. So it says, your point about high return from ESG investments is interesting. I heard that you are suggesting that it can be achieved over the long term, but do you think high returns can also be achieved over more realistic investment time horizons? He says 3 to 5 years. So do you think that ESG investments can give you higher returns even in the shorter term?
Honestly, I do not have the crystal ball. I simply do not know, but I guess at least from a pure economic law perspective, if people start investing in those investments which are already in hand, even this is, as I said, a one-size-fits-all exercise currently, the demand for those investments are increasing, and therefore probably the prices of those instruments are compared to others, among other factors like yield factors on a book level or market price level, whatever, is a driving factor. Again, is it a 2 to 3 years thing, for me, impossible to foresee that in this in this short term. Long term, I guess there will be outperformance. Short term, I don't know.
Understood. Olga, do you have anything on that? Yes. Do you want to answer?
It's interesting what Wolfgang said.
I can share a secret with you. For my kids, I opened a saving account years ago already, and I anticipated this, and I'm saving on an ESG product, an ETF, and I'm super happy with the return currently. But the entire market went well. Therefore, this was not a specific piece of art what I did. But I guess this really will pay off over the next, I don't know, 10 years or so, to had laid this foundation already years ago. But we will see Ask Me in 10 years' time again.
Yes, that's right. All right. Thank you. Any last words of advice for people looking to invest in this space? Like you said, it is a long-term investment, but any other things that one can look at from a data or a risk perspective?
My personal advice would be really have a close look, not only on the wrapping of what you are buying, but also on the content what you are buying, right? Because it's not necessarily inside what's written on the wrapping. Do a little bit of analysis, and this is also brings me to a remark I should have done earlier. It's not an easy thing. You have to educate yourself. And this is also with the variety of products I mentioned earlier. We have to make sure that people have a realistic chance, as I said, to educate themselves in order to put them in the situation that they can judge what they really buy. And this sticks to the topic that financial education as such is, at least in Germany, for example, totally underdeveloped. There is evidence that people know better what kind of oil they have to put into their car rather than what products they should buy for their retirement plan. So the interests should be raised on the topic as such, and then a simplification for those who are on the consumer side to bring them to the situation that they really can judge what they buy.
Understood. Thank you very much, Wolfgang and Holger. Very interesting discussion on the ESG impact on investments. And we'll see how the market plays out. Definitely, I think there is a lot of work for providers like us and organizations like yourself of work to do to get all of this together.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Yes.
Thank you, Petra. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to hand over now to Rajesh Dudu, who heads the blockchain and security practices in Tech Mahindra. Over to you, Rajesh, for the next session.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Padma. Thanks for handing over the baton. It's great to be here, and I've been listening to all the conversations. Very valuable insights and interesting conversations. It's a perfect segue to get into the next topic for the day. So I'm joined by two very well accomplished gentlemen on this for this particular session. Let me take the privilege of introducing them. So we have Steve Murphy, who is the Chief Risk Officer of Target Group. Steve, you may like to wave your hand.
Here I am.
Thank you.
Hello.
Thank you, Steve. So as an introduction, Steve brings in about 30 years of extensive experience of financial services, gained through the blue chip professional advisory and industry roles. He has played an active role in and provided good support to boards and senior management, balancing the need to ensure adherence to regulatory requirements. With a commercially sensitive approach, he has worked closely with firms to help them develop and grow their business. So welcome to the session, Steve. The next person
Hi.
that we have on the panel is Mark Spears. Mark Spears. Mark is a director, wealth management and private banking advisory. He's with PwC UK, and with respect to his background, he has experience in terms of providing professional services in financial regulation and regulatory risk management issues affecting companies in regulated sectors across the globe. He has extensive experience in the areas concerning the client journeys, financial crime, governance, integrity, and professional conduct risks, professional regulation, financial services regulation, financial crime regulation, anti-money laundering are his areas of expertise. So Steve and Mark, welcome to the session once again. Uh, before I uh, before I place the topics for discussion, I just wanted to set a context and also give a prelude. According to me, the old saying, health is wealth, it has resonated quite a lot because of the ongoing pandemic. And the pandemic proved this multiple times over. However, if we leave behind the year 2020, aptly described as Annus Horribilis by Queen Elizabeth, who is also a great icon for wealth and its management. Hopefully, with the vaccine taking care of health, let's talk about real wealth management aspects, especially on societal technology and industry dimensions, with focus on some key trends. Some of the key trends that I'm going to cover as part of the prelude also resonate with the inputs that have been provided by the experts on the previous panels. In terms of, it is said that from the area of wealth management, beating market benchmarks has become a pass. It's no more a strategic goal. Focus is on goals based, basically the focus is on goals based achieving clients' goals within agreed time frames. And there's also a good uh, focus on sustainable investing, adhering to compliances like MI, FID2, Solvency 2, IDD, etc., and also the application of the ESG aspects, as was evident in the panel discussion that was just concluded. Basically, the environmental, social, and the corporate governance factors, which are becoming an integral part of portfolio management. And interestingly, it is said that the investor is changing from old to new, especially with respect to the age groups. And it is estimated that a staggering amount of $68 trillion of wealth is going to change hands from the older people to the younger people, as a result of which there seems to be a very good impetus towards technology, especially robo advisories are expected to take over, primarily because not only the investors are changing from a age profile, even the wealth management experts and the advisors are going to retire primarily on account of age, and then handing over the baton either to the younger wealth management experts or to technology-led robo advisories. And it's also said that highly customized advice is the need of the hour, resulting in extreme personalization. And I don't know whether pandemic has contributed to the current scenario. Uh, there seems to be a lot of focus on cryptocurrencies currently, right? And in terms of, if you look at the cryptocurrencies and the wealth created by cryptocurrencies, the current market capitalization is about 1.5 trillion. And the pandemic has also brought a bunch of first-time investors to the market, and the meteoric rise of Bitcoin driving investments, primarily from people new to investments towards crypto. And most of those investments used to seem to be driven by fear of missing out. So given all these trends and given all these circumstances, I would like to bring up the first topic for discussion, which is primarily in terms of creating efficiencies when interacting with customers. So what is your advice, especially when it comes to aspects like complaint handling using voice analytics? Maybe we can start with Steve first and then go to Mark, if it's okay. Over to you, Steve. Sorry for a long prelude, but I thought I will set the context
That's
right.
fine. No, I think I mean, you mentioned complaint handling, but I think it starts much earlier in the process than that. So you know, I think it's very much looking at the customer journey from start to finish, from marketing and design of products, through the advising and selling of the products, and then through to the back end servicing. And unfortunately, as you say, things sometimes go wrong. Obviously, I mean, as people will see from my features, I'm quite an elderly gentleman these days, so I've been around and sort of seen this develop over 30 years in the UK. I was actually around when the very first fact find documents, as they're known in the UK, were introduced, which are the tools to gather all the information that you need to gather to be able to provide advice to customers of all types, including the wealthier customers. And that was always obviously very much predominantly paper based. And reams and reams of documents are stored in places all around cities like London and wherever, showing why things were sold and suitability letters and everything else. I think what technology is enabling firms to start to do is to make it a much more slicker process for both the advisors themselves, but also for the customers that they deal with. And that starts at the front end of the customer journey. And I would say the advice process itself. There are great tools out there now which assist in both the gathering of information and facilitating customers doing it online. So you don't have to be face to face, which is obviously pretty important in the pandemic scenario. Then using the information that's been gathered to actually put that through algorithms, risk matrices, etc., so that you're able to actually come up with appropriate advice and suggestions and recommendations for customers. And then also possibly, if you are doing that on an interactive basis, so you have an advisor speaking like we are now online, for instance, or even face-to-face, recording those conversations and using the recording of those conversations. And we'll come on in the second part to how you can use that for compliance benefit, but you can also use that for the actual advisory benefit, and using those recorded conversations to be able to create the appropriate advice, the suitability letters and things that are required, and making sure that people get products that match their risk appetite, for instance, and also look at what they've actually got available to invest so that they don't spread everything into too risky an asset, for instance. So there are a whole load of tools. Just prior to Target, I was at PwC myself, and before that I was at Hogan Lovells, one of the big law firms. And we did a lot of work with fintechs, and the fintech space was fascinating. I mean, the ideas in this type of space and the things that some of the fintechs are coming up with at the moment to facilitate really quick, solid advice, you know, using just maybe your iPhone. Whereas, as I say, if I go back many years, it was 30-page handwritten documents that needed to be completed. We've come so far from that now. So I think there's a whole load of technology, but I'll hand over to Mark, because Mark is very much in that advice space and talks to wealth managers all the time about the use of this type of technology for giving of advice.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. Thanks for the input. So you're basically saying that technology has not only brought in new forms of investment, but technology is also transforming the way the wealth management businesses run, especially when it comes to either it's a front office processes or a back office processes.
Yeah.
Interesting. Over to you, Mark.
Yeah, so I would echo Steve's sentiments. So once I've got a wealth management or wealth advisor firm and I've built that platform, I want to make it as efficient as possible. And some of the big drivers that are, some of the winds that are blowing through certainly the UK wealth management market and wealth advice market are how do we empower our advisors, managers to service more clients. And as Steve said, you know, the old school was I would, as an advisor, be on the road, going to visit clients in their houses or places of work. They may come to me at my office, but a lot of time was taken traveling. And then I would have to make notes as I went along. And as Steve said, you started with the reams of paper. We then moved to laptops. And now we're moving to sort of even more interesting capture technology. But the real sort of key to this is efficiency in the front end, so my relationship with the client, and efficiency on, in my particular area, in the second line of defence, so in the compliance and oversight and risk management of what has been going on with the client. And on the advisor side, we have a number of tools that are being used for clients to self-serve in various areas. So, for instance, one needs to, as Steve said, collect a number of pieces of information from a customer, such as their income, their expenditure, their existing assets, their existing liabilities, so their loans and what have you. And in times past, the advisor would sit with the client and go through that on a form, and that would be then rekeyed into, well, more recently rekeyed into a record system, either by the advisor themselves or an assistant who would do it for them. And a lot of the technology that we're seeing is automating that process. So either allowing the customer to self-serve in terms of they complete those forms, or going back to the open banking, open finance point that we were talking about right at the beginning of this session, the customer opens essentially their bank account to their advisor, and the advisor can then download the statements from the bank account, and they immediately get a view of the customer's income and expenditure. So that's one area where we're seeing a lot of work going on, and that then either reduces the assistant time taken in recording all of that, or the advisor, depending on the nature of the firm. And there's an element of sort of self-serve for the customer. We're then also seeing that flowing through for benefits in the back office. So the compliance element of the operation then has a number of advantages. You have a more standardized input. You can then run. You can be a little more sure of what's coming through. So that's a really interesting development. Steve also mentioned the voice recording and analysis, and I think we might come onto that as a separate topic in a sec. But that again goes to this efficiency of the advisor and efficiency of the back office process, because what I'm trying to do is, once I've built this platform, is serve the largest number of clients that I can with the fewest number of people, and also break the link between, and which we saw in the past, where The more clients you have and the more advisors you have, the larger back end workforce you needed to do quality assurance and monitoring. And some of these tech tools then allow you to break that correlation basically between larger amounts of clients and sales workforce and a larger second line of defense, as we often call it. So yeah, we're seeing an awful lot of tools come out there. I think one of your previous speakers was speaking about the AI that's being used in wealth management and is on the edges. I think it is moving towards the centre, and particularly when we start thinking about that voice analytics piece on video or meeting recording, then AI really has come on leaps and bounds from the basic transcription software, where we're now getting in multi-languages 90+% accuracy of transcription, through to then the sentiment analysis of what people are saying in those conversations, and whether they are complaining or whether they appear to be vulnerable clients who need more help. Or even if it's a sales piece. So we've seen software that then suggests the next best action for the advisor to take based on what the client has said and the product set available to the advisor. So yeah, we're seeing an awful lot of technology speeding up the client journeys, speeding up the advice process, and empowering the risk management people behind it to do more with less, or at least the same.
Yeah.
Back to you.
And I think what it is hopefully going to drive through, and if you look at the UK market, unfortunately over the last 25 years, a lot of products that have been sold in the wealth management space and in other parts of the financial services space have had to be re-reviewed and remediated, because the question is whether the advice was appropriate that was given. I think what these new technologies drive through that we've been talking about is a great opportunity to get the right answer straight off, so that the future should hopefully not see the massive remediation type exercises that have resulted in the industry. A shame in a way for people who work in consulting, because some of us may have enjoyed leading some very large remediation exercises and making quite a lot of money from them. But the idea for the actual consumer and the customer is to get it right first time. And I think the new technologies that are coming through now should enable that to happen at a great higher percentage than in the past. The fact is, though, if you do invest, as we know, you never quite know what the risks will turn out to be in the end, and there'll always be challenge at some point, I'm sure, by certain people if markets go in certain directions. Not that that should be the reason for complaints, because it's not normally to do with performance, but invariably it can still be performance that leads to things like that. But yeah, certainly a number of the fintechs that I've seen, some of the ideas they come up with currently are superb. And I think the recording one that we're going to move on to, I think that's been one of the greatest improvements probably in the last few years, I would suggest.
Got that, Steve. Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Mark. So all these changes seem to be driven by 3 or 4 factors. Primarily, first one is to provide a completely different experience to the end users. The second one is to increase the trust in the entire process. And the third one is primarily to make the business a lot more agile and reduce the cost of doing business, so that if there are any disputes or if there's any remediation that needs to be done, it's not a painful and an expensive process. So these are the parameters that pertaining either to the demands that are coming from the end consumers from a perspective of offering them a differentiated offering, or the needs of the business or the pressures that are there in the business, either from a profit margin or from a cost perspective, which are driving these changes. So these are all good. And there also seems to be a very good element of regulatory related changes, especially with advancements in RegTech and AI. Mark did touch upon some aspects of AI. He did allude to previous sessions where the previous speakers have spoken about AI. But when it comes to the compliances aspect, which is primarily driven by the recent trends in the regulatory tech and the advancements in the technology like AI, where do you see this heading towards?
Yeah. So, I mean, if I take the sort of front end of this probably, and then Mark can move on to the sort of recording side of it that exists. I mean, one of the tools that I think is for instance a tech tool that's great in the compliance world these days is things like horizon scanning tools. That is enabling compliance people, compliance professionals in firms to not only keep abreast for themselves of changes to regulation and new regulation that's coming down the tracks, but the best horizon scanning tools then can also link into the firm's actual control points, etc. And you can actually get, in effect, the new regulation identified. You can then spread the word around the business so that it helps you interact with the business in the first line of control, as we know it in the UK. And then also it can actually help automate the actual control changes that need to be taking place as a result. So I've come across 3 or 4. I know when I was at PwC, there's a PwC one, for instance, been developed, but there's several more on the market. And what they do is they scan for everything that might affect a firm and the type of business it does, and really are quite slick now in terms of that. And again, that removes the legwork for the compliance people and the compliance teams. So whereas that was all, reading lots of documents, paper-based, making sure that you change policies, procedures by hand, now all of those things are very rapidly being able to do automatically. So I think horizon scanning's made a big difference. The other one, Mark, you probably want to move on to it. I mean, again, I've seen it develop over the last few years with things like RecordSure, and a good friend of mine, Joanne Smith, who's developed that tool. They've come on in leaps and bounds, haven't they? The recording and analytic capabilities, Mark.
Yeah, that's true. I alluded to it earlier. I think you've got a really good confluence here between client relationship management systems, which have increased in sophistication and take up, and the technology around recording. It was a requirement, it has been a requirement in the UK for many years to record telephone conversations where you're giving instructions, and many firms do it, not just in financial services, of course, but outside as well, for sort of monitoring the quality of customer service and things like this. And the ability now to take that, what was just a recording, and you would need a human then who would probably quite randomly go through calls and listen to them to see what the quality of the interaction with the customer was, and whether the advisor gave the right advice. You can now automate that sifting process pretty well, and that then isolates you into calls that maybe need a human to assess whether really there was a problem with that. So they're being used in several different ways. Firstly, particularly in this wealth management domain that we're talking about, the giving of instructions and executing the instructions as they're told to you by a client is obviously key. In some of the models, you'll be sort of intermediated with a digital tool where you'll enter in an instruction, but in a lot of our clients that we see, there's still taking voice instructions. And so actually this transcription ability is incredibly powerful with clients. Number one, you can be confident that if there's a problem, you have a record that was taken at the time. It wasn't the advisor misremembering or writing something down. It's the machine taking the instruction and transcribing it for you. And then you can once you've transcribed it, you can then run every imaginable process over that, whether that's for anti-fraud or anti-money laundering, or for the complaint piece that we were talking about before. It really does then open up a huge avenue of quality assurance. And when you combine that with the information that's captured now in client relationship management systems, it can then build up, take the pattern of behavior that they've seen from the client, or the machine has seen from the client in the past, compare it to the interaction that it's just transcribed, and see if there's any deviation or anything that the firm should be concerned about. So this has really acted as a force multiplier for compliance staff and risk management staff. We've seen it in the anti-money laundering domain, where there is transaction monitoring, and that basically what that does is it monitors a whole forest of data to allow the human to concentrate on the unusual tree in the forest. And really, this is what these tools are doing for the interaction, the voice interaction with the client. Obviously, you get false positives, and you have to train the machine. And as ever, the technology is only as good as the implementation and the data it's being fed. So that's the key, is to get these things. They've got great promise, and they promise to really, I think, revolutionize the way that we do business. But they'll only do that with the proper implementation of the appropriate technology to the situation and the size and complexity of the firm that you're looking at.
Yeah, fully agree with you, Mark. And whether it is driven by regulation or whether it is driven by customer preferences, the focus seems to be on creating that single source of truth to record all those transactions and refer to those transactions in a indisputable and an immutable fashion. That seems to be the need of the hour, or that seems to be the focus. That also brings a very interesting connect with the couple of questions that are there on the chat screen. There's a question on decentralized finance and where do we see DeFi going to. Let me take it in terms of, so decentralized finance has been fully architected on the principles of distributed ledger technology, or blockchain. We are already seeing several applications of decentralized finance, whether it is decentralized exchanges from a perspective of trading of cryptocurrencies. Currently, as I said before, there's about $1.5 trillion of market capitalization with cryptocurrencies, whether it is Bitcoin, Ether, or around 8,000 such alternate coins that are there in the world, which are traded in about 35,000 exchanges in different parts of the world. And at $1.5 trillion of wealth, incidentally, it is higher than the gross domestic product of a country like Australia. So there's a significant amount of wealth that has been created. And if somebody dismisses as some inconsequential activity, it is completely incorrect. Through these cryptocurrencies, the DeFi concepts have definitely have come to a mainstream implementation. And in addition to that, recently there was a guideline from US Office of the Comptroller and Currency, where they said that the banks and thrifts can use stable coins for processing payments, whether they are cross-border payments or money remittances within the country. they have permitted the banks and thrift to use stable coins. That's another interesting application of the concepts under decentralized finance. So decentralized finance is making its inroad day by day, and it is going to stay here for a long, long time, and it will completely transform the wealth management industry and also the payment industry, pretty much like what we are seeing with respect to activity of fintechs or API banking or related aspects. Then the second question that's there on the chat screen is in terms of how do we see KYC and re-KYC process as part of the wealth management functions. And the question relates back to blockchain-based solution. Can it play a role? Steve or Mark, would you like to pick it up?
Mark, are you?
Yeah. So I think this is a really interesting question, and I have seen some solutions out there utilizing or starting to prove identity through blockchain. I have to say we haven't yet seen it in so much in the individual space, because I think the wealth management industry in general is fairly behind the curve when it comes to the adoption of new technologies. New technologies tend to be adopted within the banking space, especially in this domain, because the banks feel the pain of the anti-money laundering laws probably a little bit more than the wealth management firms. I think at the moment we're not seeing a huge penetration of these technologies in wealth management. I think there's a perception within the firms that and to the point previously around AI, that it's not yet mature enough to bring into the heart of the body. It's still at the edge. So I have seen it used in other domains, in trade finance. I know that some of the banks are using blockchain to prove ownership and what have you, and identity through the trade finance transaction, but that hasn't yet in the UK anyway started to penetrate overly. I think the issue here is why would you be collecting why do you collect information, and what information do you collect? You collect government identifiers, and I think until you can or someone develops a capsule where you can deposit all of those identifiers and the government recognizes it, so it sort of replaces the identity card or the passport or what have you. I think adoption of those is going to be quite difficult, because I think that the regulations will push you to having a government issued identifier. I think maybe within a firm you could see that them being potentially shared within a global firm, but I think adoption's harder until government get behind it, because all the regulations require the firm to get a government issued piece of documentation. So that's been, I think, the main obstacle to adoption here so far.
Yeah, definitely. And also in terms of there seem to be consortium-led approaches also to make this a reality, especially with the advent of self-sovereign identity, where you're using decentralized identities that are fungible across different service providers, not necessarily banks, wealth management providers, but across the various kind of services, whether it is telcos, utilities, and various other aspects. And you're absolutely right in terms of having solid regulation and acceptance from the regulatory perspective becomes very, very important from an adoption perspective. So I think we're getting close to the top of the hour. So I'll hand it back to Karan. Karan, over to you.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Steve, and thanks, Rajesh, for holding the session. I think it went
good.
yeah. And thank you everyone for joining in. And it's great that we saw a lot of participation coming in from Asia, Europe, and US as well. So, and we really finish on time with these kind of sessions. And it's great to see that we are leaving the people with some time and probably more value from the sessions that we've had today. And with this, I would like to take the opportunity to thank all the panel members for joining in, sharing their views and their experiences, and also the team who's helped us set up the event. We will share the on-demand recording video as well with the people who've registered, maybe by tomorrow or day after in the coming days. With that, thank you everyone, and please stay safe.
Thank you everyone. Bye for now.